job they're doing. I do a hell of a job.
Oh, perfect. Wow, you got the touch, huh?
He hasn't missed that, got it, yeah.
The new nickname, huh?
So, good morning, folks, and, we have the folks with us this morning from the Vermont Fairs Association, and this is a meeting of the Senate Ag Committee, and it's Wednesday, February 21st, and, we'll introduce ourselves and then we'll turn it over to Jackie and you folks and we'll get started. So,
Good morning, everyone. Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District in the Senate.
Hi, Irene Runner, Chittenden North, which includes Fairfax.
Brian Campion, Bennington County. Steve.
and Rich Westman is the one missing and he's from Memorial County. And I'm Bobby Starr from Troy, Orleans. So, again, I want to welcome all you folks here on this cold morning. And we'll get started and I'll turn it over to Jackie and you can run the show.
That's what they let me think, sir. Good morning, my name is Jackie Folsom. I am the lobbyist and secretary of the Vermont Fairs and Field Days Association. And we're delighted to be here for our annual visit to update you all on how our fairs are doing. A couple of them are going to be talking about the challenges that they're having with the 3-acre rule. A couple of our fairs are not involved in that as of yet, but they all will be coming under it eventually. So we just wanted to give you an update on that. We have an impact data sheet regarding attendance and economic impact. I think the fairs will probably tell you that it was tough last year. They were right in the midst of that rainfall and a lot of them did get hit pretty badly. Some of them towards the end did not. So that is good news. But as usual, you know, when you take a hit at the gate, it is a problem all the way around. And then we have these other things coming down the road in regards to state and federal regulations that we're hoping that you'll hear and understand and give us a hand with trying to figure out how to deal with those. So we're now here today. We've got Memorial Fair, we've got Addison Fair, we've got Rutland Fair, we've got Caledonia Fair, and we've got Bonneville Fair. So a good representation. I think we kind of hit maybe just about all of you as we go around the table. And I'm just going to ask the folks to come up and introduce themselves and talk about their fair. They all receive capital grants, which comes, you all vote on that, but it comes through the institutions committees, and we'll be visiting those folks later today. And they all receive the stipend, which you all vote on. And we're very grateful that that has come through the House, the Agency of Ag budget. Right now, it's at $110,000 divided between 14 fairs. So it's enough to buy some premiums, turn the lights on, give
That's stipend or
that is, the stipend is $110,000. The capital grants is 300,000. For 330,000 it was this year for some reason. We got that 30,000. Thank you very much. So, and the capital grants, that is, I won't say it's competitive. We only had 11 fairs apply for that. You have to own your property so that it automatically eliminates Franklin County. And they aren't here today. Well, let's see, I think everybody else gets them. So there's 11 fairs that qualify for the capital grants, and that'll be going out. I guess you have to bill back for it, and then they get the money, they can start their projects. So you can ask them what they're doing with that. The stipend is based on a formula based on how many attend the fair, how many displays they have, and that sort of thing. So it's a little different.
how much is a stipend?
It's $110,000, but it's different for each of the fairs. Some of them get as little as $3,000 and some of them get quite a bit more than that.
And has that been increased or decreased in the last?
Well, we had, when Representative Partridge was here upstairs, we were sitting in there one day and she mentioned her favorite word was budget dust. And she found some budget dust for us in the tune of $90,000. So one year, last year, I believe it was, we got 200,000 in the stipend, but it went back down to 110,000.
Well, this year there's main money.
I know, and we're very grateful that it wasn't cut, believe me.
Yeah.
I always make sure that those two funds are, Daddy.
And I think the 330 in the capital bill is in the governor's recommend, so that's,
That's a good, okay,
yeah, it's where it was last year.
perfect.
Thanks for sharing. Jackie, I'm wondering, has this list expanded over the years or decreased? I'm just thinking of other fairs sometimes and how somebody, we have the Dorset Fair, for example. Like if a fair like that wanted to be part of this group, what are some of the qualifications and,
So any organization can join the fairs and field days. It's
Okay.
usually based on a percentage of the stipend that they get.
okay,
To receive a stipend or a capital grant, you have to be open 3 consecutive 8-hour days.
okay.
So that
That
eliminates.
eliminates a bunch.
Yeah, although I
Yeah.
have to say, we worked with Guilford this year because Guilford Fair had not been receiving the capital grant. And, we said, if you're open, they're open on, well, it's a Labor Day fair. So they're Monday, no, I think it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whatever. But they weren't open on Saturday. They were allowing people to come in and that sort of thing. So we said, if you were open and you were allowing people to come in and picnic and maybe have a band play,
Yeah,
that qualifies.
okay,
We're trying to be very fair about it.
yeah. So the big thing is the 3 days, 8
3
hours.
days, 8
Okay,
consecutive.
okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
and, so we have, for example, Danville Fair is
Yeah.
2.5 days.
Yeah,
And I've said to them,
yeah,
not that I wanna lower the amount that these folks get, but the more fairs we have, we can come in and say, look, we're growing. We obviously, we have lost the farm show, and hasn't
Right.
been in 5 years, and we're a member of ours, and I'm not sure what's going on with that. The last fair, well, Springfield Fair was one that happened, and that hasn't happened for a long time. Washington County Field Days used to happen, but that hasn't happened in about 20 years. It was another one that didn't own their own property, so we were bouncing around everywhere. And it makes a big difference, owning or not owning.
yeah, all right, thanks for that.
Yeah, well, thank you, get it started, and who would you like?
Roger, why don't you come on up and talk about Memorial? Sadly, Richie isn't here, Senator Westman is.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the grants and stuff, because we wouldn't be able to do it without it. We're a very small fair. We did about 8,500 in 3 days for the 3 days. We are in the process of replacing one of the barns. We've extended one of our grants from 22 to this year to try to get a little more money and stuff, and we've got 100,000 to put towards it now. And we're looking probably to borrow 75 to do the barn. With this grant here, we just got noticed the grant, so I think we're talking about $200,000 to replace that barn. That's the cheapest price I got so far. I'm waiting to trying to find an engineer to see if we can save the roof. The state wants us to get an engineer in there to say that the trusses are comparable to, to the walls that they're gonna put up. So I haven't found an engineer yet to come up. I'm still working on it. We're hoping to get started right off this spring once we get the cars out of there.
That, what type of a barn?
That we use that for vendors,
Well, they set up.
they set up in the barn in there, yeah. And then we have a slab on the end of the barn. I can't remember, I think it's 30 by 40. That the little dance floor there, we have a little stage, so the music and night play out there, so if people want to dance a little bit, they can.
Does it happen to be, may I ask a question? Does it happen to be an old barn, like historic preservation?
well,
Would they?
it was built, it's one of the first barns I think they built. I'm not familiar that much, I've only been with the association
Okay.
8 years.
Yeah,
But it's one of the oldest barns, and the walls are leaning a little, they use telephone poles.
sometimes historic preservation, which Jack.
No, I don't think it's,
If not, okay,
No, they won't have trouble with that.
So we're kind of waiting on this, I'm kind of waiting, trying to get an engineer in there and see. If I can save that roof, I can save $10,000, but we don't know. Until if we don't, then we'll have to do it all from scratch. So as far as the fair this year, I was sick. For the 2 days, so I wasn't there, but everything went good. Our animal barn filled up over full. We could have used more room. the arts and crafts is coming back. It kind of went down after the pandemic. But we're trying to get the kids back into it now because the kids were really, into it before that happened. And now we're trying to get those back in there, but, we have, a family could go there, a family of four could probably go there and the kids can ride all day. And, to eat, I'd say they could spend $125. They could have a day out, the whole family and stuff. We try to keep, we run our own food booth. So we try to keep our prices down to help out,
Yeah.
and everything's going great besides that, and we haven't got hit on that waters runoff stuff yet. They haven't been up there. So we're hoping we get it out of it. Cause we're all saying, but that don't mean nothing. It all depends what they say.
Doesn't mean much to some of the regulators, but we're working, trying to get that get the fairs exempted from that 3 acre rule. Because most of the fairs,
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense to start with. And then it's gonna put some of them out of business and for what?
we did drill a new well, which helped us out of the water situation over there, so we don't have to have a tanker sitting there all three days. We usually get that donated from the notches, but never charge us anything for it, but we finally used some of that grant money to,
They didn't donate the well?
no. They did donate the well, they used us good, they knocked off some, they let us use some of their equipment and stuff and to dig the pipe to
That's nice.
the building, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's a big sponsor every year, $2,500. So, or anything we need, another thing we use is he lets us use a bucket loader and anything we want, he'll let us use. So I want to thank you again for the money and stuff, and we do have some good sponsors, not as many as I'd like, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Do you usually see Senator Westman at the fair?
I always
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, like I said, I wasn't
He
there.
rides around on the golf cart.
I wasn't there Saturday and Sunday. I got sick Friday, overdone it, and my wife wouldn't let me over there.
And it's not wet except the parking sometimes. And so if we can get something done about the 3 acre rule, so we could, if we dump a little gravel in to help the parking, that we don't fall into that, I'd be happy.
Yeah,
Gravel is an impervious surface.
I know it is, and
Yeah.
and it's pretty much dry where all the field days is, but the parking sometimes.
yeah, the entranceway gets muddy, but you've got, we have a guy that mows it, does the hay on it, so that helps us out some.
As long as we dump a little gravel and it doesn't dump us into the 3 acre.
Yeah, so
We don't know yet. They
I
could
don't know yet, so
Okay.
we were thinking put some more gravel on that, on the back gate where you come in and a little bit in the front, but we're gonna hold off now.
Yeah, until I get stuck.
I think we get stuck, there's 2 bucket loaders over there. It won't be any problem pulling.
Roger, I'm gonna have you yield the chair to Chris Vance from Caledonia. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, as was mentioned, I'm Chris Vance with Caledonia County Fair in Lindenville.
I think I sat in your dad's seat when he bought the house and I moved up in the back where Roy used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've taken over as president from Dick Lawrence.
Oh, yeah.
Had an opportunity to, meet last year. I don't remember what committees we did or did not get an opportunity to come in and speak with. I would just tell you that again, like all fairs, we're very appreciative of the stipend and the capital grant. Capital grant, I think, has been critically important. I'll pass around some pictures, but just gives you, this is, what really we've done over the last 5 years in completely revamping or replacing every barn on the fairgrounds. So I'll just kind of throw those around so that you have an opportunity to just look at some of those pictures. The capital grant, obviously, I think is critically important as we talk about, what we how we feel about the importance of fairs and festivals to the community. You guys, sitting on the agricultural committee, obviously I'm very familiar, have a lot of experience, in agriculture, growing up. I would tell you that, where we see, ag today in the fairs, is kind of amazing. Because, I would have told you that with the loss of so many family farms, that we would see a serious reduction in exhibitors and attendance. And actually, it is the one thing that continues to hold true. With Dick's leadership, obviously the importance of our barns were in really bad, shape in terms of age and, just deterioration. This allowed us, and I think I mentioned it last year, but maybe not to this committee, but I would just share it, that we were able last year to pull the New England Holstein Show, which has historically always been in New Hampshire at Hopkinton Fair. They came to Caledonia County Fair last year for the first year because of the improvements to the grounds. And that fair, or that organization, had some of the best attendance that they've experienced over the last 5 years. So they had over 200 entries in the show. And this year we signed a 3-year agreement with them so that they'll continue to come back to Vermont for the next 3 years. So I think that's quite an achievement. And again, that all came from obviously, what you've allowed us to do with the capital grant to, kind of get us started with these projects and be able to, at least, go out and solicit other folks. So again, that's important to us. And again, we're thankful for that. And also the 3-acre rule right now doesn't affect us at this particular time, sorry. But it will come our way. And as was mentioned, it is definitely something that without question will just put most fairs just out of business, and that will just be the end of that. So, but that's all that I have to say.
Yeah, well, the only fair way, to deal with that 3-acre rule, if we can't get it exempt, is those of you that don't get hit with it should have to help those.
Correct.
that-
That's correct. That's right.
You gotta keep the
As
whole.
long as it works the other way when it comes our way, yes.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can get that damn thing fixed.
So this
Makes no sense, right?
This is just more of a question for you. I just got an email last night from a constituent that has a house and they're doing an expansion. And the new rule is a ½ acre.
Right.
And I think it's a ½ acre if you do any expansion. Would they fall into the ½ acre? Then every right fair would be.
Would will fall into it.
With the fairs, if they put up a new building or did that immediate, because if it's a ½ acre, everybody would be.
I would assume that they would.
So I think you're gonna hear from Addison a little bit later, which is under the 3-acre rule, and they have a permit and an engineering plan, and now they want to expand and they need a new permit and a new engineering plan. So it's just an
I think
endless.
that's my,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I just can't tell with the new rules
Thanks,
and
Chris.
changes, a ½ acre.
So what? We can talk about the ½ acre.
I'll show you the,
Morning.
Good morning. I'm Robert Congdon. I am the president of the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which is the Vermont State Fair down in Rutland. And I'm also the president of the Fairs and Field Days Association. To start off with, I also want to express our appreciation for the grants and the stipends. We have been very successful as well in getting infrastructure addressed. That has been a long time coming. We most recently were able to replace one of the roofs on one of our largest exhibit halls, which had been a long time coming. And the exhibitors were very happy to have dry heads this last fair week. But we also are working on reorganizing and redoing some bathrooms in our historic 4-H building. And also, we have desperately needed an upgrade to our water system for our agricultural area, and that's gonna take place under last year's and this year's grant as well, is gonna be taking place. We, not to shift to doom and gloom, but we are probably the group that is facing one of the biggest issues with the 3-acre rule. There's no easier way to put it other than we will likely be out of business in the next 5 years, due to it. Due to a few different issues. The first issue is just sheer cost, obviously. If we are not able to do anything, our estimated impact fees would be between $800,000 and $1 million, $800,000 and $1 million. That's without engineering, that's without any of the added expenses. Our engineer has done an initial look at our grounds and has flat out told us that there's no way that we can build a system to deal with the amount of stormwater that has been said will be dealt with.
How is that dealt with at the present time?
Presently, again, we have a lot of green space, so you're dealing with, the just natural runoff. We do have some drainage, obviously, that's on the ground, some catch basins and things like that. But that's under the current guidelines, that's not considered treated stormwater. It has to be treated before it gets to another facility. So what they're saying is we would need to treat even a portion of our water at a minimum 3 large catch ponds that would need to catch all the water. One of the sections is where rides set up that would have to turn into a catch basin. The other is our camping area where our campers get put during the fair. And then the other one is another large parking lot that we have. So those are the 3 areas that have been initially looked at. It's been estimated that to build those 3 catch areas also could be well over $1 million to construct. And then we would not have treated everything because those 3 areas would still not be able to catch what the current guidelines are. And because of that, we would still have to pay impact fees on top of that. Not $800,000, but we would still have to pay a significant amount of that. So right now, we are actually in our initial, it's gonna cost us about $10,000 to do a initial feasibility study. And then after that, it's estimated that we would have at least $30,000 to $40,000 into engineering. And then after that, we would have to pay the impact fees for whatever engineering determines we can't treat. So if they determine that we can treat, we're in at 17 acres right now is what they have us down at.
So your total area is 17 acres.
Total area of impervious service.
Impervious service is 17.
Is just over 17
And-
acres.
How much total land do you have?
What's the total, Rick?
Around 60.
60,
Just under 60.
just under 60, yeah.
And in your 17, and how much of your 17 would be the pits and everything you have to put in?
What's that?
So the 17 is the impervious surface. You would
Yeah.
have to, we would,
But it sounds like what you're gonna do with taking parking lots and taking
Correct.
camping area, that you're taking some of the impervious.
yeah, no, so that's not impervious. So you're in the treatment facilities go into non-impervious
Okay.
surface. So, and what they're talking about would definitely, I would say, impact another probably 3 to 5 acres of the property. Is what they're looking at, that it would take to do what they're talking about doing.
So, every time it rains very much, we get reports on television about Burlington running their sewer system running over. Well, they must have 7,500 acres of city up there that goes down into that sewer thing and right directly into the lake. I wonder if they're using them like you're trying to use you guys. Yeah, if we're gonna play ball, we all gotta play by the same rules and if we're gonna. I mean, how wet does your fairground get?
We have one area, so we have a brook that runs through our fairgrounds and that obviously plays into that. And we obviously have some flooding in from that, but in a way, and I think Brian will speak to this, we are kind of the catch basin for Route 7, which runs through. We're the catch basin for the neighborhoods to the east of Route 7. And all of that comes together onto our fairgrounds and we ultimately act as the catch basin.
Yeah. So you're
I have to leave, it's the budget adjustment, but I wanted to hear part of this, so thank you.
Thank you for being here, guys, thank you.
See you later. So, do you get anything for being a good neighbor?
No, we actually got reached out to a year ago, by the city seeking to utilize us even more for more water, and we kindly declined, so.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. The other thing that Robert's mentioning, it all goes into money and cost. If you take part of where the rides sit now and make a retention pond, you lose the revenue from what you would have gained. You lose the camping area, again, there's revenue impact. And the parking lot, I don't know where else people are gonna be able to park. If you take the parking lot out, you're gonna have to go outside the fairgrounds and find a new place. So all of that adds to the cost, I think, as well. It really is unfortunate. I mean, it rains and then it dries out, and then it rains and it dries out.
Yeah.
That's the way it's been for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I don't know exactly why we're into this.
The other piece that we are struggling with is, and this plays into this as well, is in order to have the retention ponds, that land, just like when you're building a house, has to be able to perk. And what is an issue that we face is we've been told as an initial guess, and Rick is an excavating company, he's done a lot of digging on the fairgrounds. The estimation is that our land likely will not perk. Which leads to a whole nother set of issues, because if it doesn't perk, we're back right at square one where we just have to pay $800 to $1 million, which interestingly enough, that $800 to $1 million is gonna go into the pot of money that other people can apply for and use to build their systems. And so in a way, I get penalized for the fact that we can't build a system, but yet all the money that we put in is gonna go to help other people build systems, so.
Sounds like a system I'd like to be in.
So,
Yeah.
so.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'd say if we're gonna do an exemption, sooner the better, only because it sounds like you're starting to spend money.
Yeah.
10,000 here, 20,000 there. And that, in the end, if we do say, okay, we're gonna exempt, we're going to make some changes, that would save you some. Sounds like the sooner the better.
Correct, right now, we are under the, and I have to sign the paperwork, so we're right under the gun for that $10,000 feasibility study.
Uh-huh.
But again, 2 months down the road is when the $30,000, $30,000 to $40,000 is gonna be coming due, and, there's lots of, this is gonna very rapidly snowball. I know Tim Shea from CBE is not here today, but he, if he was here, would share with you already that they already have mounting costs. I believe last time he and I talked, they were between 30 and 40,000 already that had been spent.
And you won't get that back.
And it's not coming back.
Well, no, don't worry, that's been spent already. Well, any other questions?
I appreciate your
That was
time.
helpful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob.
I'm gonna ask Cindy Cahart from Addison County to come up.
Yeah.
Now, Roger, is that?
My father-in-law,
Father,
he was my father,
yeah,
and he always spoke with you.
yeah, well, I spent a lot of days with Roger.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yep,
good,
Yeah.
good God.
loved it up here.
Yeah,
Did. So this is my first year as president. Diane Norris.
Sure.
Retired after, I don't know, she was on the board for 37 years. So, wow. So I want to thank you also for your, the funding that we get sent. This year we made, a new camper line. Seems like now, I always tell them, back when I showed my cows, we slept on bales of hay in the barn.
Wow.
That's outlawed, and there's just more and more campers there. So we added that camper line with the money from you. And this year, we are also building a new barn that replaced, how old was the old barn? Is it built?
20.
Yeah,
boy, those are
Wow, this is
nice
great.
looking fields.
Jeez.
Yeah. Looks pretty nice.
Ask how much this costs. Looks really good.
That's gonna be like over 400.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
yeah. And that barn that we're building is replacing the old existing barn, and then we used to have a tent that we put the beef in, so we made this barn big enough, so we didn't need to rent the tent.
Yeah.
That is hard to come by and very expensive,
Boy, that's a high barn, a nice barn.
yes.
Yeah.
And it's already full with storage.
On the winter,
Yeah.
rent it
Yeah.
out, yeah. Yeah,
Irene.
So, thank you for all the good stuff, and yes, the stormwater treatment has hit us. Ken just showed me, we've spent 36,000 so far in getting
Engineer and.
right, we paid the engineer, the permit, and now it's 2,600 a year just to have a permit. Every year we pay that fee.
How much every year?
I think 2,600, just to renew your, just to be able to say you have a permit. I guess.
must be, it takes them a long time to write it.
Must be.
Yeah, a permit that costs that much has gotta take a long time.
Full of quill pen.
Maybe it's a book, is it a book or a one?
So, and so we have a permit. So I asked our engineer, I said, okay, so we have 2 more buildings in the next 5 years that we plan on building. And last year, as wet as it was, we had 4 rides that the carnival couldn't set up because the ground was too soft. So we want to gravel that corner for the rides, and then in the next 5 years, build those 2 buildings. And he said, well, you're gonna have to get a permit each time. And I said, so why can't we just make like a 5-year plan and tell you, this is what we wanna do, build your treatment pond big enough to hold it all and be done with it. And he said, no, every time you make any impervious update, so the carnival is what we wanted to do this year, you have to reapply, get it re-engineered, and make an additional treatment spot. So that's just where it just,
Yeah, it looks like the pictures, your land sloped
it does.
down toward that tree line.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And so is that where you build your
Um,
sediment pond?
no. It was gonna be over by where we have our tractor pull is where they were looking at,
Yeah, on the
right,
wall.
right, there's a
There's
little
a
hole
low spot
there. So. So we're just kind of beside ourselves, not, it's kind of hard to move forward when you don't, you know,
Well,
know
no,
how.
yeah. But you'd think they would want you to do a master plan that would be good for 5 years or 8 years, and as long as you met that criteria.
Right.
You would be fine.
Just to add on to what Cindy's saying, about 10 years ago, when we started having them, when they were applying for capital grants, we, Representative Emmons really promoted the fact that if you had a 3 to 5 year plan, it would be easier for them to see the buildings adding on and the results of what's going on. So they all are working on that now. They all have plans where a long time ago it was starting to bury the electrical and putting in new bathrooms. And now they're doing the buildings, but what this law does is say you can never expand again unless you want to add $50,000 to $70,000 to the cost of doing business. And that's what these folks are up against now, which is a real warning sign. I mean, you look at what Caledonia is doing and they haven't even been hit with this yet. And they've got some great projects going on, but once that happens, as Cindy says, unless you want to keep adding more money into that ground, it isn't feasible for any of them, which puts us up against, well, so if they can't do any more building, you know, are we gonna have a challenge with the capital grants? Because that's what they've been putting the money into.
Has the group ever met with like the governor?
No, not yet. We'll be glad to, if you think that would help.
Well, you know, it's all right to talk with the hired help, but if you get to talk to the you know, I learned years ago, you can play around out back but you go talk with the boss and try to get some direction from them and, you know, like Phil, Governor Scott's an excavator and, yeah, he's worked with his hands and to make a living, and he understands that a little bit different than somebody that spent years up at one of them colleges and then they come to work and tell you folks how to do everything right. And I mean, we can do certain things, but if he was
Behind it.
supportive of trying to do in this 3-acre rule, it would really help our cause, because, I mean, we're up against it pretty bad. That younger crew, I mean, that's fine for them. You know, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
That
The
crew
new-
upstairs,
Yeah.
you know, if it made any sense at all, you know, if you were polluting a river or washing out driveways and roads and.
Well, like,
Well, Burlington's a good example of where
Yeah,
the big
they
problem
don't
is.
pay a dime.
our gates are closed 6 months of the year, there's not a car
Right.
that goes on there, so for 6 months, it's safe.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Cindy, I do remember probably 4 or 5 years ago now, the Welcome Center
Mhm.
and the problem we had getting the bathroom
Mhm.
approved and the tank, and you're all set on that now, people,
Yes,
you don't have any more,
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah.
Well, that seemed to take
all the time,
way longer than it should.
yes.
Well, it was gonna contaminate the whole county.
Yeah, right.
Even though we have it pumped every day,
Oh,
right? Yeah.
So did you have to put that big tank
We
in?
did.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we spent like 40,000
yeah.
that project.
Yeah,
Yeah.
being pumped every day. Yeah, okay.
We have one more fair to go before
Thank you.
our time is up.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Cindy.
thank you.
Thanks.
Bonneville Fair here.
My biggest supporter, here he is.
Just for you, Senator.
And now it's nice to put a face.
See you.
So, as with the rest of the fairs of folks, my fair in Bonneville Fair, my name's Scott Shea, I am the president of it, and it's actually the Winhall Industrial Society that business that puts the fair on.
Oh, they've asked.
We would have been out of business 3 years ago if you folks didn't have the grant stipend program. Our electric system was archaic at best. We went into a shift of management 3 years ago. I took over and the first thing I did is, cause I didn't wanna work that hard, I brought back one of our real go-getter members that left the fair because of the previous. Jackie reached out and said, why haven't you guys applied for grants? And everyone was like, we didn't even know they existed. So my vice president, Elizabeth Grant, has since applied for grants for 3 years running, and we have received them every year. And we have gone from a main service fee of 240 amps, which we were pulling 380 through the box, to a 800 amp service. In doing that, it has allowed us to expand our electric to the point where we can now pull in more diversified vendors, because everybody uses food trucks now. We have all the power in the world to power those up. It's safe. I'm not afraid of anybody
Having a fire.
having an accident, but the broader scope for us, we're small, we're 9 acres. 2 of it's parking. We're a small fair, we're 3 days a year. We are, and there is some contention, but we can prove it, we're the oldest continuous running fair in Vermont. We didn't even close down for the year for COVID. We found a way to keep our floral hall open. We had entrants come in with their fruits and vegetables and our projects, meeting all the COVID guidelines, and then 3 of us went in, we judged everything, we awarded prizes, and we were allowed to say we had our fair. We did it for 3 days. But the broader scope is that by you giving the grants and the stipends, awarding it, it allows us to free up. We don't have a big bank account by any stretch. 3 days, we're gonna see 5,000 to 6,000 people. So we don't have a huge bank account. But what that grant money and the stipend money allowed us to do was to be able to use our money in other areas. Like we bought a brand new digital scale for the horse and oxen pull. Now, granted, the pullers still argue that the scale is not correct, but you know, those guys are pretty serious about.
About as good as it's gonna get.
Yeah, but most of them are very happy because it is giving them a more accurate reading on just what their team weighs. They're extremely happy. We have better lights on the track for them. And then even went as far as little things like we were able to purchase 2 huge 100 by 100 tarps to cover the track if it rains. The area where the horses and the oxen pull, so it keeps the clay dry for them. And when we're ready to go, we can reel that stuff back. And we are always up against, Lindenville has their horse pull the same night we do. And we're always up against them. Lindenville puts out good prize money, big prize money. Again, with the awarding of these grants, we were able to jump our payouts up because we were able to use our coffers in that respect. And this year we had a really good drop because it got out there that we had jumped our price up. And then your stipend, we use, insurance and ribbons and trophies. And it was Winhall's 225th year. We were able to purchase the most ostentatious, huge ribbons you've ever seen in your life. And the horse pullers, and that's all they care about, horse pullers and oxen, is ribbons. And they were, my God, I thought my arm was gonna be shaking right off. They were so happy, and it was nice to see that. We hadn't seen that in a long time. Because our fair had been in somewhat of disrepair. But in 3 years, we have really turned a corner. Flooding, it's because we have a geographical advantage. Winhall sits at the headwaters of the Winhall River. Flooding very rarely affects us. We get a little debris on the grounds. So unlike some of my other brethren, we didn't suffer at all because of the flooding. It just doesn't hit us that hard. And our attendance has grown every year. One of the other things, because of the stipend, we put in the Elon Musk internet system, which allowed our vendors to then use electronic means of payments. Families love that. They're not tearing up their cash coming in. And we're the same, we're an all-inclusive ticket price. It's one price at the gate, your kids can ride all day long, as many times as they want. And that's the, like, for me, that's the crux of it right there. The fairs are a Vermont tradition. They go back, I'm 57 years old. I can remember going to fairs as a kid. I can remember going to the Bonneville Fair. And by being able to hold that gate cost down, because we're getting capital improvement money, we're getting stipend money. I think in this day and age, it's tough enough for everybody to meet living expenses, that if we had to do these capital improvements off of our own money, we would just have to say, okay, it's done. It's allowed us, we run a concert series and it's time, it's free. It's a give back to our community, there's no cost to get in. We get sponsors to cover the bands, we have a farmer's market, so we've also, it's allowed us to expand the use of our ground. So it's not just 3 days a year. I mean, that's the thing that, 3 days of the year, it looks like $1 million, and then it just sits there and it's like, So, no doubt, I mean, when I was asked, and I mean, I'm 2 hours and 15 minutes away, so when I was asked to come here, I was ecstatic because I was like, absolutely, I want to go and see the people that make this a possibility and a reality for my tiny little fair
Right, yeah.
to stay in business. And I'm so happy I actually got to meet my senator. Thank you.
Too, yeah.
Yeah, if he'd have known you were coming, he could have flown down and got you.
That would have been.
You don't think that it, like.
And I wouldn't fib about it.
Well, who was it, the rep from Shasberry years ago? He was on a pros, he did fly back and forth, you knew him. You know who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, but I forgot his name.
Yeah, Whitman, or not Whitman, yeah, somebody
Marshall.
down, Marshall, yeah.
Marshall, but
Used to be a rep down in Bennington, used to fly back and so forth. The only person I know that has a plane now, do you know Senator Sears? He
Yeah.
flies back.
Well, just kidding.
I thought there was a one-seat district.
Well, that's the thing, right down in Bennington County, I mean, that every election,
So
there's two names on the ballot. Champion.
yeah, and he's just glad his people see his people. Right.
Thanks, Bobby. So Scott, how does the 3 acre thing affect you?
I don't think it's going to, when we first found out about it. Like I said, people in southern Vermont were always late or disorganized to some degree. So when we found out about it, it was in the winter, we have not had a chance to measure up
Okay.
what our actual, but I don't think we're gonna hit that, where, as I say, we're.
It's 7 acres and all.
Yeah, yeah, 9 acres, 2 of it we use for parking, which is field. Which, when we have had mud problems, we've actually put stone in it. So measuring up the roofs and what little blacktop we got,
Okay.
I'd be surprised if we hit that
Just
3
one.
acre mark. If we do, we may decide to get rid of a few buildings. Something,
Well, there may be another solution. Someone knows that.
I don't think we're gonna hit that. I really don't. We are just tiny compared to some of the others. I mean, but in that respect, I do find it quite deplorable that we would lose our Vermont State Fair because of regulations of just magnitude. It's just mind boggling to me, but I think we're gonna be okay on that. We have very little.
Okay.
Most of ours is the grass. We do sit on a gravel base. Because we have a drilled well that we put in some years back, so we didn't have to pump out a lot of years back. I'm hoping, but I don't think we're good. We don't have any big barns. We don't. Not like some of these like relevant fees, I mean, they got huge roof lines. We don't really have that. But being in the winter time, there's 3-4 feet of snow down there on the fairground, but I just didn't have it in me to go down and start measuring.
I think you can, those maps are available on DEC, that you can find how much, and and it would be wonderful if you didn't have 3, but if you have 3.1, you're fine. So
Yeah.
that's the challenge. There's no wiggle room on that thing.
Yeah, and for a small fair like us, I mean, we wouldn't even attempt if something didn't change within that law, the restrictions. We would just say, and then funny enough, the land actually, so in the charter for the Winhall Industrial Society, they were charged with the task of putting on an annual fair every year to promote agricultural and science, mechanical advancements in farming. If the fair stops, the land reverts back to the family that originally donated it for us. So it's kind of an interesting, we're like the trustee holders, we're allowed to buy, sell, all of that. And it would be a hard pill to swallow.
And Rutland is in the same situation.
they are.
It will go back to the family, the heirs, if they can decide.
Interesting. Maybe they're the ones pushing the 3 acres. How many acres?
In our case, there's it's estimated 200 heirs would have to duke it out, so.
That's
How many, you got a lot of acreage.
60?
60.
Yeah, 60.
But there's like, what, eight families that would have to duke it out or something like that, so.
If you know about Winhall.
Yeah, that's right.
The property in Winhall, I mean,
That's right.
a piece the size of this table's gotta be worth $100,000. It's insane.
Yeah. Totally out of control. Yeah.
Absolutely. But again, I thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks. So long.
Our fair would not survive without those stipends. And the apple brands.
It's a long drive for you.
Yeah, funny enough, the last time I was here was when I was in grade school.
Really?
Came here on a field trip,
Oh,
yeah.
that's great.
They took us to the State House and to the museum
Yeah.
over there, and it was just really funny. I was like, wow, man, that's a long time.
We'd like to thank you very much for listening to our fair
Thanks for
today.
organizing.
And we will, and I think not only the governor, but perhaps Secretary Moore, because this comes under her jurisdiction. Maybe we'll try to get a meeting with both of those folks at the same time, talk about their challenges and what we're hearing.
Yeah, because we're gonna need help, to get something passed.
We'd love to have you help as much as you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to meet you too. Thank you for coming up. Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see
Yeah,
you.
Say hello to the boys.
I will. It was nice to meet you. I heard your name several times.
Yeah, I'm gonna bad at probably what they said.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Hey,
Say
here.
hi to Terry Norris for me.
Bobby, I'm just gonna be 2 minutes. Just gonna
Yeah,
grab
I
my
don't
phone.
know where Pepper.
Okay,
Yeah, I got,
Chris out there.
okay.
I
lost
Rick, Norcross.
Yep.
Sent me some extra tape, so.
I already have one.
Yeah, I got one too.
Oh, you did get one?
Yeah.
Oh, good,
But thank you.
yeah,
And those two guys don't have CD players, so
they don't,
no, they admitted that last time. They don't have a way to play it.
well, that's good.
And this really clears the room now.
It does.
Yeah,
Yeah, they heard you were coming.
yeah, and they hightailed out of here.
They said the heck with him. And, Ryan just, I don't know, he had to step out from him. Did you get those sheets that
I did, Linda sent them to
when
me,
you sent?
yeah, I've got, the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition and the John Rogers.
Yeah, and, we, certainly didn't wanna do anything on any of those until we had a chance to hear your take on it. I kind of marked some of mine up, thinking that some of those things were not very realistic, but I'll let you kind of run through them and give us how the board would deal with these things. And I mean that, I don't know how much authority does the board have in changing anything?
Well, I think some of these issues, and I should just introduce myself for the record, James Pepper, Chair of the Cannabis Control Board. The board can do some of these things. Some of these things are just statutory interpretation. Some of them would require statutory changes. And I can proceed however you'd like me to. I mean, I could start with the Rogers recommendations and go through them, and then move to the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition recommendations. Some of them are overlapping. And so that's what I need to stop me throughout.
Yeah, that, like, we start right with number one, because we had John in.
Mhm.
And I guess his situation, he bought his family's farm and he did some work at the farm. But where he lives is where he's got his cannabis
Right.
and, but they're two different, two different, what?
It's a-
Not, zip codes, but two different spam numbers.
Right. So, I guess just starting from the general principles, just taking a step back from all these recommendations. The bill that created the cannabis board is over 100 pages long. It touched, I think, 11 different committees. I think the law says that 7 VSA 901 says that you're entitled to one license and it has to be at a single location. So what does the single location mean? That's left to rulemaking at the board. What does a single location mean? Is it an E911 address? Is it a single span? Is it contiguous spans? Is it any property that's under single ownership, regardless of how connected they are? It's a challenge for the board. And again, we had to write our rules at a time when we didn't know what our staffing was gonna be. We were originally given two full-time employees. We didn't know what was coming with respect to our compliance or licensing team.
Yeah, it was all brand new.
Right. So we had to just create bright line rules that regardless of kind of the situation, we knew that we could kind of look at an application kind of remotely in Montpelier and decide this meets the one location rule. Or, when we're out ground truthing it with our compliance team, that we can just easily identify that this is one location. You don't have 10 plants over here and 20 plants 2 miles down the road and, so. They're connected to public highway. It's a kind of a good example of we want to use existing infrastructure. We don't want to force people to rebuild things that are existing. But how do we draw the line? What is the line between this one location? How contiguous do they have to be? How connected do they have to be? We had to deal with a case where we had two parcels that were separated by a third, and this person had a verbal right of way. You know, what if that verbal right of way goes away, you know, and we're not allowed to access, you know, as compliance officers. And so what we said in our rule, and I'm happy to revisit this, is you can have multiple spans. You can have two spans, but they have to share a common board. They have to be abutting spans. And that's what we determine one location means.
They have to be what?
They have to be abutting. They have to touch.
Yeah, see, I don't think his land
No, it doesn't.
reaches from one to the other.
So then it doesn't, no, they're separated by a few miles and they're connected by a public road, which makes it convenient for our compliance team. And our compliance officer did look at it and said, I mean, this is a workable standard. I mean, this is a workable exception. But then it turns into, do we have a bright line rule? Like, well, do they have to be in the same town? What if they're in different towns? And what if there's 3 towns in between them? And, you know, it's just, do they have to be within a mile of each other, 5 miles, 10 miles? It turned into just, we needed a bright line rule to make it easy for our compliance and licensing team to know that this was a compliant parcel. But this is one where if you want us to do something differently, you know, we will, but
Well, I'd like to be able to accommodate John, but you pop that can open and yeah, it could lead. So the next guy could be 4 miles away and across town or, I mean,
we're admittedly inflexible on this, but it's only because of that can of worms. And, you know, and where does it end? You know, it's just
well, and yeah, you get calls like that probably every week about wanting to change this or change that. And we, you know, we're pretty, well, I am anyway, pretty proud of the way you're running things and don't want to let it get totally out of control and yeah, you know, it makes you wonder how much change and how quick you should change things when you're just getting at it.
Yeah. We do try and just be self-reflective and honestly, all of our rules are either tied to a statutory requirement or they're in service to consumer safety, public safety, and the proper functioning of the market. We've tried to pare them down to just those essentials. And I think most people that operate in Massachusetts or New York or Connecticut would say that our rules are a lot clearer, easier to follow. They're not 500 pages. I think they're about 60 pages all said and done. You know, we do try and pare these down, but we're in this balancing act of, we've got 7 compliance officers. If they have to really piece together where this one farm is, you know, where this one operation is, you know, it just takes more time for us.
Yeah, and you, number 2, do you have anything on that?
I think that's not even cannabis related.
No.
I think that's just what, if you guys want to do that, I think John was here and so you might as well just bring up all the issues, not even
Yeah.
cannabis.
Yeah,
Number 3 is almost identical in concept to number 1, which is, you know, I know it sounds maybe hyper technical, although there are a lot of lawyers at the CCB. You know, 2 of our board members are lawyers, our executive director was required to be a lawyer, we have a general counsel. So you know, there's a lot of analysis that comes down to the actual interpretation of the statutes that you gave us. But here's the thing, as you said, cultivators can process and package cannabis flower. So the cultivators are allowed to cultivate and play around with their flower.
the grower.
The grower, that's right. You said a product manufacturer is allowed to take that flower and convert it into cannabis products, essentially anything but flower. And this to me sounds like what he's asking for is to be a manufacturer or have manufacturing authority granted to cultivators. I mean, essentially what we're saying is that if we were to allow him to do this under his cultivation license, then what we'd have to be saying, we'd have to be interpreting the statute to mean that those little concentrated THC pucks are cannabis flower and not a cannabis product. I know it's hyper technical, but you know, it's kind of saying,
So why can't he get a manufacturer's license?
I think his argument is too burdensome, too administratively burdensome. It costs too much money. And this is kind of this is the like the low hanging fruit of, well, this dust falls off the cannabis when you're processing it, when you're cutting it down and you're curing it, you're turning it into, you know, joints, pre-rolls. Why can't I take that and then make something useful out of it? And of course, we would want him to be able to do that, but the law says, you know, if you can use flour and make it into things. If you want to create other products other than a joint or kind of smokable flour, you have to get a manufacturer's license.
Yeah, he said something about screening it. You know, you could
Yeah.
screen it out and then he has to go someplace else to get the little pucks.
Yeah. I mean, if you say that those pucks are cannabis flower and that they're not products, then that also means that he can infuse his pre-rolls with them and not have any sort of packaging restrictions on that. Not have, you know, the testing is different. You know, the potency limits that are in statute, do those apply to cannabis? Is it a 30% potency limit on that pre-roll, or is it a 60% because it's a solid concentrate? You know, it once again opens a can of worms that, you know, again, we want to accommodate small farmers. We don't want to hide their hands behind the backs, but this is a very bright line legal distinction in law between cannabis flower and cannabis products. And allowing this really does blur those lines. It's kind of like, what other extraction method should we allow? What other kind of manufacturing processes should be allowed for a cultivator? Should it just be manufacturer is someone that deals with solvents, and a cultivator can do anything else other than solvents? You know, again, this is just another can of worms that we're opening up if we allow this without a manufacturing license. And we do have kind of a low barrier, low cost manufacturing license. It's modeled after the kind of Department of Health home-based kitchen. Very low entry cost. You're capped at your annual sales at $50,000. So, you know, because it's kind of like the impact is potentially low. We made the regulations for that tier of manufacturing very low. And so, I mean, it's not
Thousands of dollars.
it's $750, but there's also $1,000 application fee, which is by statute as well. Every license type has $1,000 application fee.
But 1,700, and that's good for just 1 year.
For 1 year. And then you can recoup you can sell up to $50,000 worth of products under that license. So it's not an ideal solution, but it is, you know, trying to meet people where they're at, trying to understand how people are going to be able to be profitable in this industry and offer them pathways to that, and not trying to blur the lines as to what's cannabis flower and what's cannabis product.
Yeah. And the $1,000 fee is that something that's standard?
It's for every license. It's just set by statute. Yeah. I mean, one thing that we have thought about in the past is just if you're applying for 2 licenses at the same time, you could pay one fee, you know, just the $1,000 one. If you're applying for 3 licenses, instead of paying $3,000 in application fees, that you just pay the $1,000 application fee. I mean, essentially, and there's a piece in here about fees next. The fees don't support our budget anyway. So, you know, how much of that excise tax do you want to backfill our budget is the real question here when it comes to if you want to waive any fees for people that are either applying at the same time, or if you're lowering fees for outdoor cultivators or increasing them for indoor cultivators. You know, they're just not gonna be enough to cover our budget. So you're totally justified in either reducing them or increasing them.
Yeah. Well, wasn't it last week we got in that little fight up on the floor over some of the fees and according to after school programs?
Yeah.
The schools kind of wanted to get hold of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because we got it set up where the excise fees go to, I think it's after school program.
It's the sales tax, yeah.
And but anyways.
Yeah. And the excise tax covers the kind of delta, the difference between what our fees are generating.
Yeah.
And what our operating expenses are. So that money comes directly out of the excise tax.
What about number 4?
Yeah, so outdoor licenses are unfairly overpriced when compared to indoor licenses. He's not wrong. I mean, the general kind of, the shorthand is an indoor cultivator, average indoor cultivator can harvest 4 times a year. The average outdoor cultivator can harvest 1 time a year. And so really we propose to the legislature kind of a 4 to 1 price per square foot. That put us well out of line with all of our neighboring states. And, we were competing for the same entrepreneurs, I should say, because we came on at the same time as New York did, at the same time Connecticut did, and Rhode Island was just starting out. So we felt that we needed some kind of parity with our neighbors. So we proposed that with just straight 1, 4 to 1 ratio between indoor and outdoor fees. And then we proposed an alternative plan that was a little bit more affordable. And it was essentially a 2 to 1. So right now, the way the fees stand is 75 cents per square foot for outdoor, and it's $1.50 per square foot for indoor, roughly speaking.
Did you see those prices again?
75 cents per square foot for outdoor. Okay.
So it's
Indoor,
2 times.
$1.50. Okay.
Okay. If they get 4 crops in the outdoor one.
And the indoor, they also have increased electric costs. They have, infrastructure fit up, the lights and HVAC systems.
Well, everything must cost more because they got 4 crops.
Right.
They must buy 4 times more if they use fertilizer or seed or.
We also have a much stricter regulatory burden on indoor cultivators with security and monitoring, things like that than we have for outdoor cultivators. And we essentially allow small outdoor cultivators to kind of pick from a list of best security practices, but they don't necessarily need to have cameras on every plant or motion activated lights or 8-foot tall chain link fences. So their regulatory burden is less. So we thought that on balance, the 2 to 1 ratio made a little bit of sense, but I know that the House really wants to look into fees this year. We asked Representative Kornheiser to put us on a standard fee review schedule, every 3 years, look at our fees, adjust them. But our fees were first passed in 2022. So 3 years would be next year, but if this is the year to do it, it's certainly fine by us. Again, our fee revenue is not covering our budget, so you're totally justified in raising or lowering them however you want, because one way or the other, they're not going to cover our budget. Even if they were much higher, we'd see drop off in the number of licensees, and it would probably be kind of a break as to what they are now. But John's not wrong though. That they're taking on a lot. Outdoor cultivators taking on a lot of risk. There's aspergillus that drifts through the air. There's floods that destroy your crop. he's dealing, like, outdoor cultivators are in probably the toughest position. They're always fighting with the first frost, and, heavy rain. It's really tough to be an outdoor cultivator.
But farmers have done that for.
Right.
Yeah, if you grow a crop outdoors.
Right.
You're subjected to
Yeah,
adverse weather, all types, wind, hail. Early frost, the whole 9 yards. But they are considering. House Ways and Means is considering.
right.
Fee change.
We have a fee change proposal for the medical side. And so that's, I think that's gonna trigger just a full fee review. And I think the general gist from what I've heard is they wanna go to just a straight 4-to-1. As in, 75 cents per square foot of outdoor, multiply that by 4, $2.50 or whatever for.
Yeah.
For $3, sorry. So, remove the requirement that employees of grow operations must go through a background check. So I'd love to not have to do this. This is honestly, background checks, like if you're growing a tomato, no one cares that you got arrested, 20 years ago. This is really running background checks is a statutory requirement. It's there for a reason. I think your counsel, not me, but Michael Grady would explain that the reason why we do background checks is because of kind of 2 documents that were produced under the Obama administration. Colorado was first coming online, that were aimed at how the Department of Justice was going to deal with legal sales of cannabis in the states. Because this is still a federal crime. And they kind of gave what their guiding principles were. And if the state could create a regulatory structure that achieved those guiding principles, they're not going to send the DEA and shut it all down. And they're really aimed at people that have ties to gangs, cartels, criminal enterprises. As long as we can kind of show the Department of Justice, the DEA, that we know who we're licensing, then they're not going to prioritize us for enforcement. So what we did is we created a list of crimes that are presumptively disqualifying. These are violent crimes, crimes that involve firearms, trafficking crimes, trafficking of regulated drugs, any sort of dispensing to youth crimes. So when one of these pops up on our criminal history records, we go through a process to determine, we look at the nature and circumstances around that conviction. How old is it? Were there any subsequent convictions? Is it part of a pattern of behavior? And, were there any other kind of social determinants that we can look at? It's essentially very similar to what people do when they're seeking an expungement. It's the same kind of process that prosecutors go through when determining whether to grant or deny an expungement. And if we think that this person, if the crime is old enough, it's not a pattern of behavior, didn't involve guns or, violent behavior, it wasn't, then we'll grant them an employee ID card or, they've overcome this presumptive disqualification. We've had people that have not overcome it. We've had people apply to be employees that are serving sentences on the weekends, but want to work in a cannabis shop during the week. We've had deny situations like that.
I think so.
Right, yeah, I mean, we've come down on both sides, if people have overcome this presumptive disqualification, or they haven't, but to just say that we don't do background checks would probably at least raise some eyebrows at the Department of Justice as to what we're doing. There's no state that doesn't do background checks for cannabis.
I thought he mentioned something about the cost of it. There's 2 different types of background checks, and one costs quite a lot of money.
We will hopefully get this fixed. So the Cannabis Board is not a law enforcement agency, meaning we're not entitled to possess criminal history records. We have to apply for that authorization with the FBI. We did that the second we were seated in 2021. We applied, we showed them our statutes. We said that we're authorized, the state authorized to do this. I mean, there's, I think 300 or so, state agencies that receive criminal history records. So this isn't abnormal. But we got denied. Essentially, the FBI wrote us a letter after a year saying, we don't feel comfortable with your statutory definition of who you're seeking these records for. And it was for owners, principals, financiers of cannabis businesses and employees. They felt that the language in statute was a little too vague for them to feel comfortable giving us these 50 state criminal history records. So we needed to move forward no matter what. We were on a timeline. So we did what Massachusetts does, which is we use a kind of, a private investigation firm. They do like employee checks when, private companies are hiring new businesses, new employees, and they do their own 50 state background check. And it is quite expensive. I think it's $475. And if you have you got 5 owners of a business, multiply that by 5. For employees, there is something called the federal ID check, which is different than a background check. But for employees, we felt comfortable because it's not an actual license, it's an authorization card. It's an ID card. We felt that it was okay to use that process for employees, but not for the owners and principals. And we're at the same time that we were denied by the FBI, Connecticut was denied, Montana was denied, a few other states were denied. They used the same language that we did. They've statutorily changed their language and they've been authorized. So we tried that last year. We're trying it again this year.
FBI background.
We're changing the definition of owner and principal and financier in statute. We're essentially just copying what Connecticut has in theirs, and they just got approved and by the FBI. And so we think if we copy what they did, then the FBI should theoretically approve us as well. And then it will be, instead of $475, it'll be $35.
So you're working on that one.
We're working on this as quickly as we can. This is actually if you count the original bill passed, this is the 3rd time that this definition will have changed in order to accommodate the FBI. But we'll see. They have full discretion on this decision.
If I remember correctly too, he was talking about family members.
Wanting his family when they come up.
Without having to go through, but just because someone's family doesn't mean they wouldn't necessarily not pass a background check.
And that family member can do the $35 process. It's really just the people that are profiting directly from this business. Employees have the $35 route. It's the owners of the businesses that have to do the more extensive background.
Well, that makes sense.
So you gather all the information and then you decide whether or not it's sort of the judgment call or the decision applies with all of you. Or are there guidelines that you need to follow? If somebody has this, they're not going to get the permit, that kind of thing.
The core memoranda, that's the Obama, laid out the 7 principles that they are not okay with.
Got it. So that's what I follow.
Convictions using firearms, dispensing to youth, illegal divergence of trafficking in different states. So those are just kind of red flags, they're immediate kind of no-goes. But when it comes to other offenses, the legislature gave us
discretion. Okay.
We said you can't deny a person unless they cause, you can only deny a person if they cause a present threat to the proper function of the market or to public safety. So that's the kind of general guidelines that we evaluate other crimes that may implicate guns. If they're violent offenses. I mean, violent offenses wasn't listed in the whole membership, but it's something we certainly want to look at. Thank you. Free a low-cost add-on license that allows growers to grow cannabis that's under 1% THC. So this is creating a hemp license, a state-run hemp license. All I can say about this, I know we've talked about it in the past, that, you know, the USDA, the DEA, they don't care what our laws say about the definition of hemp versus cannabis. I know, there's a nuance there, but, if we deviate from that federal standard of 0.3% THC, they're gonna want to, that's a controlled one substance to them, you know, even if we say in our law, well, we say 1%. So when you cross that threshold of 0.3% THC, all of the problems that are associated with growing cannabis all of a sudden reattach. You know, you don't get, there's no banking, there's no lines of credit, there's no federal tax write-offs, there's no interstate commerce of those products. So we could do this. It would certainly come at a cost to the CCB to kind of administer this.
Even if you drop down, right? Like this is to allow for less than 1%.
Yeah. But, you know, the banks, the insurance companies, the federal government all consider that a controlled substance unless it's below 0.3%. And so really what we're talking about is creating a very low barrier entry, low cost license that has all the same problems of cannabis, and it really only impacts people it will really only benefit people that want to grow hemp, the federal definition of hemp, and cultivate high THC cannabis, because those are the only people that are being excluded from getting a hemp license, is the people that also have a cannabis cultivation license. But it's really important to remember that if you're growing cannabis, even if it's at less than 1%, it can't cross interstate lines. It has to stay in the state. So, I mean, what John is saying is he doesn't want to waste even a single portion of his canopy size that he's licensed to grow low THC cannabis. He wants a separate license, a separate canopy for that. And really, he's in a very small number of people. I mean, we'll do it if that's the will of the committee to have us create this, but there's an administrative cost to this. And it's a very small number of people that want to do both. And, you know, he could easily do it under his existing license. He just thinks that, you know, the money is in the THC. He wants to grow hemp for other cannabinoids, non-THC cannabinoids, but he doesn't want to waste any of his existing plant canopy to grow those cannabinoids. I know it's complicated because this is
So
hemp.
that's a choice that John, well, he's made that choice, I guess. That was his own decision.
That's right. I mean, he had to relinquish his hemp license because the USDA won't allow a co-owned business. Even if you have the legal fiction of, you know, two separate LLCs, and, you know, one is your cannabis LLC and one is your hemp LLC. They won't allow that to happen. I know Sam Bellavance got caught up in this. He was a longtime hemp producer, got a cultivation license. He did everything a person possibly could to have a legal distinction between the two businesses, two sets of equipment, two different parcels, two different owner, like LLCs. And the USDA still.
Up in Alberg or
That's
something.
right, yeah. And they still pulled his hemp license.
You got it figured out?
Nope, that one I don't know how to figure out.
14% of the sales tax should go back to the CCB. That is already happening. So, you know, I think our fees, kind of, yes, I probably shouldn't just speculate. I think they generated 3.5 million for the first up until kind of January. So a little over a year and a few months, year and a half. Our operating budget annually, I think, is around 3.5 million. So the difference between our fees is already being supported by, and we're in a just regular budgeting cycle. When we present our budget to the governor's office, to the appropriations committees.
Yeah, your fees don't do too good.
No, I mean, and that was intentional. I mean, it was an intentional
This is
decision.
down to 1 meal a week.
Right, exactly. It was an intentional decision to keep them low enough.
Yeah.
That, that ordinary people could participate. So that's the last from the Rogers. Should I shift to the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition?
Sure.
Equity funding, I very rarely want to tell you how to spend taxpayer money, other than when it's supporting, our board and, so this is really a decision for the legislature. We've made this recommendation before that some portion of the excise tax should be reinvested into the communities that have been disproportionately harmed by the war on drugs, by cannabis prohibition. We didn't put a dollar amount or anything like that on it. If one of the purposes of tax and regulate was to try and kind of correct or mitigate some of the ongoing harms of being arrested, convicted, the intergenerational harms of the war on drugs. And yet giving someone a cannabis license is having them participate in a very high risk scenario. It's not a systemic way to actually correct any of what was a systemic problem. And so that's why we've supported in the past, the recommendation to invest a certain portion of the excise tax in these communities that have been harmed by cannabis prohibition. You currently have, pursuant to a bill last year, have the Racial Disparities Advisory Panel looking at what is a community that's been disproportionately harmed by cannabis prohibition. Is it defined by a certain geography? Is it defined by certain demographic factors? Is it defined by certain kind of social determinants of health? Like what is a community? And how much should be reinvested in those communities? So this is really not an area where the cannabis board has an opinion. I mean, I personally have opinions, but it's not something where we as a regulatory body should be telling you how to spend your money, or this money. But that's a little bit different than their next one, which is a certain portion of the revenue should be reinvested in this cannabis business development fund. This is a fund that was set up in recognition that kind of the forest viability of the HCB, the Sustainable Jobs Fund, the Working Lands Enterprise Board, the Intervale UVM extension, none of those kind of support organizations will touch a cannabis farm. And so this is a fund that was set up to fill that gap. It's administered by the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. It interviews kind of our social equity applicants, our social equity licensees, and gives them technical assistance and support, offer legal services, help building brands, websites, and then also just kind of direct grants to help support them. It originally was funded with $500,000 from the excise tax. Last year it was re-upped because all the money had been expended. It was re-upped with another $500,000. And there's a bill currently moving through the House. It will just replenish it one more time with $500,000. So that's just, that is directly supporting these struggling cannabis businesses. And then proper positioning the community investment or the business development fund administration. I think this is just getting at, is ACCD the right place for it? Do they have any expertise in cannabis? Is this, are they the right kind of entity to oversee this fund? I don't know the answer.
So they didn't make any suggestions. They just, I don't recall. So now it's commerce.
That's right, yeah. So the
Marketing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if it moves from ACCD, it should probably include a position. ACCD the person who's running it right now, I think has a lot of double duties. And I think that if there were any criticisms that said, A, there's not enough money in there to be really impactful, and B, is this really a priority for ACC? You know, so, I mean, maybe you authorize VHCB, the Farm Force Viability, to kind of do this, give them a position. So, I mean, I don't want to speculate as to what this means or where the best location for it is. If you want to hear from, you know, ACCD about how it's going, I think that would be helpful.
I think you'll find we're not in a position to create positions.
Yes, I know. That's right. Okay. Should I move on to the next? Yes. Okay. Direct markets. So this is the direct consumer for cultivators. This is an issue that we've been hearing about from, well, I mean, from before the bill ever passed, you know, in 2020, from the moment we were appointed. You know, the board is not opposed to this. It's probably more of a longer term vision than it is kind of a just flip a switch to do this now. I think this is kind of, I think, you know, any farmer can understand that this direct market access is a lifeline for them. And it's the way, especially in the absence of real advertising in cannabis, for them to develop a customer base, to develop a brand for themselves, kind of have direct interactions with consumers. There are certainly legitimate concerns that we have about rolling something like this out too quickly. This is still almost entirely cash business. I mean, there are some debit cards, things like that can be run, but you know, MasterCard, I think, you know, pulls back their authority from time to time on debit cards. So this is a cash business. It's a valuable crop. The price per pound of kind of smokable flower fluctuates depending on quality, but you know, outdoor probably around 1,400 a pound. You know, indoor probably around 3,000 for, you know, a pound for, you know, really high quality cannabis. This is not I mean, essentially, even knowing where a cannabis farm is something that we don't publish. We don't, you know, it's exempt from the public records law as to the exact address.
How much a pound?
Well, it fluctuates tremendously. For smokable flower, I would say for kind of good outdoor, around 1,400, 1,500 a pound. For good indoor, probably around 3,000 a pound. You know, we have 400 cultivators. To think that all of a sudden they can all just kind of open their doors to on-farm sales, I think it presents an immediate public safety risk. We have 7 compliance officers. If all of a sudden we had, you know, anywhere between the 75 current retail stores we have, a potentially universe of 400 farmers that are selling, you know, essentially kind of retailers. It's just, it would be overwhelming for our 7 compliance officers to oversee.
How would you ever keep track of? You know, the tax.
And the tax department would probably want to come in here and explain.
Person in each place.
Well, and the tax compliance, you also have the ID compliance, the age restrictions. We have education programs that are specific to people that can work in retailers that are public facing. There's storage and cash management problems. I mean, those are kind of immediate concerns. So, you know, I think this is the direction you go that I think needs to happen. New York has had farmers markets all last kind of summer and fall. It's not, you know, impossible to imagine, but you know, I really think that the kind of way to do it is to start small and kind of have us demonstrate to the legislature that this concept could work. You know, I think that a group of farmers could potentially form a co-op and then collectively buy a retail business, for instance. You know, I don't know why that kind of avenue hasn't been pursued. There are a number of cultivators in the state that have a retail business, including our smallest, you know, tier 1 cultivators. It's really what's being asked here is to have a very low cost retail license. It's not, direct to consumer sales. It is authorizing a very low cost retail license. And I've kind of put the ball back in the court of, a lot of these advocates saying, go through our retail license regulations and you tell me which ones are not important, which ones are not essential to public safety and consumer safety. And if you tell me that, we'll cut them for everyone, I mean, the cost of a retail license is $10,000, so that is a barrier for sure. But if a couple of cultivators got together and pooled their money, I mean, it's not inconceivable that they could kind of figure this out.
Yeah, 3 or 4 got together and formed a little co-op like you suggested.
Yeah. And then, the legislature on the other side, the House is also at least starting to look at a special events license. They would do this on a very limited scale. If you could have maybe 5 cannabis farmers markets next summer or something after the grow rules. And that could be the kind of go slow kind of proof of concepts. And it could operate under an existing retailer's license. So, retailer, the way they do it in New York, is the retailer gets together with at least 3 cultivators, at least 3, and they have a farmer's market. The retailer is in charge of security, ID checks, all the kind of tax collection and compliance. It's their license on the line, but but cultivators are there to kind of do that kind of interaction with customers. Just looking through this list, I'm not sure, agricultural use and exemptions, exempt farm buildings used by licensed outdoor cultivators from the public building definition. That's in the House bill right now.
That's the one where they require them to put sprinklers.
That's right. Well, I mean, it's really, fire safety is really just asking for some clarity here. I mean, for outdoor cultivators, if they're kind of a sole proprietor and they don't have any employees and they're on a farm, they're issued what's called a non-jurisdictional letter saying fire safety does not have jurisdiction because it's not a public building. What the outdoor cultivators do is they bring in some temporary employees at harvest time to help them just cut everything down and move it into the shed for drying. And so that puts fire safety in a very awkward position where it's like, well, we issued this letter saying that you're not a public building, but all of a sudden you have employees coming. And now you are a public building. And now you need,
Yeah, but farmers aren't public buildings.
well, it's only because, the law designates cannabis not a commercial product, not an agricultural product. So if they were growing hemp, for instance, which is an agricultural product, none of the building codes would apply. But because they're growing cannabis, high THC cannabis.
John talked about that, didn't he? Or one of those guys that you bring in extra help and at cropping time for, a day or 2. And
Right.
then you gotta put a
Yeah, exactly.
$50,000 sprinkler.
That's right. And fire safety is just, strictly reading their rule, strictly reading their law. I mean, once you start bringing in employees for a non-agricultural building, because this is a commercial product.
There's gotta be a way to fix that.
The bill that's moving through the House has a date that just kind of exempts outdoor cultivator buildings from the kind of, it exempts them from being a public building just because, if they're growing cannabis outdoor, if they're an outdoor cultivator. So I think you will see that language after crossover, because I think that is clearly the jurisdiction of this committee. It'll come here, so. The wetlands issue, it's a very compelling story, very that you heard the last time about the lady whose culvert needed to be resized and then everything froze. There was, canary reeds, or, the A&R decided that it wasn't a wetland. She had to get a delineation from a private company and it cost $2,000. and that person said it wasn't a wetland. It was just like everyone kind of pointing the finger at someone else. I mean, very challenging. I don't know, I mean, this is, really, we don't have an opinion on this. If you want to say that outdoor cultivation should be exempt from the wetland rules, I mean, it's a can of worms that you're opening, but it's certainly something you can do.
Well, I mean, DEC they've gotten pretty rough with their wetlands. I mean, yeah, I got letters in the other room that would bring tears to a normal person's eyes, reading it. And what they put two different individuals through over wetlands. I mean, young people trying to build a house and then just stories are not good. Well, they're true stories as far as okay, so
And I'm happy to talk about any of this stuff. I mean, the complete expungement of all cannabis related charges. I will say that the judiciary, when home grow was passed, was directed to automatically petitionless expungement. You know, you don't even have to ask for it. They're required to just delete from the books all cannabis possession charges. And not the dispensing to you, not the trafficking, just simple possession. And I think they've made it through at least the bulk of those by now. So that one, while it's not any and all cannabis related charges, it is a huge benefit to those people that have just the possession charges.
Or not sell it.
Not selling, just the possession. Yep. Public consumption anywhere tobacco is allowed. I mean, sure, I mean, if you want to do that. It's,
well, tobacco is almost outlawed.
Yeah.
So I don't know what why can they only smoke cannabis in certain areas?
it's a civil penalty to consume cannabis in a public space.
Yeah.
So that includes, essentially anywhere other than your house. I think there's ways to kind of get at this without allowing a full blown kind of allow cannabis to be consumed anywhere. One thing that we've been talking with the House about, because they're very interested in it, is having a limited special event, like a wedding, where you could have a designated area, just like you have kind of a beer garden at a music festival, where there could be cannabis sales under the guise of it's an insured event. There's cannabis, there's insurance for the event, there's a highway safety plan to get people to and from these events. There's all the kind of tax compliance, age gating outside of public view. There that would allow for very limited kind of open consumption. And when I say open, I just mean that civil penalties would apply. But really, the way that the laws are written, I think it's $200 as civil penalty for consuming cannabis outside. And then increasing the home grow allowances, 6 mature, 12 immature. I mean, the board doesn't have any authority,
So what's the one on renters or renter to get permission? If you rent a place, that's A under that.
I think a renter could, put into a lease agreement, no use of illegal substances that could kind of look towards the federal Controlled Substance Act.
Yeah.
So I think how they would enforce that, I don't know, whether it's being enforced currently, I don't know, but at least theoretically, a landlord could prohibit your cannabis use, in a rented space.
What's, about that tier one employment allowances, what are they talking about there?
You know, I don't know. I mean,
You want criminals to
tier one employment allowance.
be able to work, or?
I don't know what they mean there. I mean, we are relatively flexible when it comes to our employees. We made a decision that an employee, when they're applying for an employee ID card, it's essentially an authorization to work in the industry. You don't have to designate who your employer is. So it allows this kind of free mobility of the employee to go. I mean, they have to tell us where they're working, but if they could change jobs if they want to, or they could work in multiple places if they want to. So it's pretty flexible currently. So I don't know what additional allowances they're talking right here. This could be just no background checks for employees. It could be that, you know, John Rogers wants to have his kid come and help him out. So that background check.
Can I go back to the Richter piece? Is this short term, long term? What are we talking?
I think the concept is that there should be some protection for renters to consume cannabis in a rented space. You know, this is, you know, Vermont considers this a legal substance. You know, maybe there should be a renter kind of bill of rights that says they can consume all legal substances. And a landlord couldn't restrict someone from using a legal substance. But
Well, they grow and don't ask.
Well, that's the thing, is like, I don't know how much this is actually being enforced by landlords or how many times this provision that would prevent them from consuming in a rented space. And I mean, certainly,
I don't need to, but quite frankly, it smells different and is more pungent than a lot of things. And my other tenants complain.
It goes right through.
Well, if you have a building, you have a heating system where it sucks it in and moves it out, and the whole building smells. And so most of the reaction that, and I'm going to only speak personally, in that most of my reaction to it comes because I get complaints from other tenants. And what am I gonna do at that point?
So you can smoke, so it's up to the association or the apartment building owner whether or not smoke cigarettes and or marijuana.
Well, I asked them to all smoke outside.
Yeah.
In this particular case, it becomes more difficult because they are not supposed to smoke outside.
Right.
So, but I asked people with cigarettes to please don't smoke in the apartments.
Right.
And in my, and I do have one Airbnb of 19 rental units, but my one Airbnb, I put 600,000 in the house. I don't want anybody smoking anything, So I asked them to go outside, but you move to a public space when you move outside.
Yeah.
I have 12 units in one area. It's 4 buildings. And, I asked them to smoke outside because it bothers other people in the building. And so what do? And I only react most of the time to complaints from other tenants. And the marijuana becomes more difficult because they're.
Well, it must smell like clothes up.
Well, no, it smells the whole building. And particularly if, and I don't go inside to anyone's apartment once they get a lease unless invited. But when they grow without asking. And that smells.
Right, yeah.
And if you have a heating system that's forced hot air, it gets pumped all over the whole building. So what am I supposed to do?
put hot water in.
What do you do?
Is it in your lease? Can you penalize them if they don't?
Well, I can
Why?
ask them not to, but you kick somebody out. But,
Yeah.
but
How are you going forward?
even within that, what do I ask them? Do I ask them to go outside where it's public, where they
Can't smoke either.
where they can't smoke either? At least with the people with tobacco, I can say, go outside. And, you know, I don't wanna be judgmental or anything about that, but
Oh, yeah.
it raises whole issues for me. And if they're smelling it downstairs, I have one tenant, she doesn't like to go into, be a corrections officer and smell like weed.
So what about,
Sorry,
um,
it's,
number 6?
It's,
That'd help Richie though.
increasing the home grow allowances.
Yeah. That'd be 100% increase, right?
I think the current ones are too mature for immature.
Only two.
Right, I mean, you know, this is just a pure policy decision. This doesn't implicate the board's authority. It doesn't implicate any of our laws. I mean, this is a criminal law. This is, I think, Title 18 law that sets the home grow limits. This is a kind of a judiciary issue, I feel like. You know, I don't really hear, first of all, there is a pathway for some people to get 6 months, 12 in insurance. That's getting medical coverage. That's the allowance for medical growth. You know, but we haven't heard many complaints about, of course, we wouldn't be the recipients of the complaints, but about the kind of home grow limits that are currently set in by law. So, I mean, this is just kind of, do you want to move in this direction? Yeah, I think that's just kind of an internal debate.
6 mature plants, or wouldn't that take in quite an area?
Yes, I mean, it's a lot of cannabis, you know, I think, you know, what we heard from the medical patients when we asked to change the limits to this. Was that they're growing outside mostly because it's low cost, less electric, less odor issues. So they get one shot, and if they have, and they're growing this for medicine, and it's gotta last them all year. And so if they have a pesticide issue or a pest issue or some sort of mold or detritus or something that damages their plants, they could be out a year's supply. And so they asked for an increased allowance to 6 and 12. And the legislature granted them that last year. So this would be saying, well, everyone should be in the same boat, but you know, it's really just your preference, on the legislature's preference.
So. Yeah, so the house, are they working on, no, they did it last year, right?
They did that for the medical last year. Yep. Everyone decided that the patients that sometimes need higher potency products, they need more kind of biomass to begin with. You know, if they can't grow what they need, they don't really have it. They can go to a dispensary and, you know, pay, you know, how much, but that this for patients that are using this therapeutically, they should have a higher.
Or would you say 1,500 a pound?
For outdoor, yeah.
Yeah.
So it is expensive for patients. There's no, you know, obviously there's no kind of Medicaid reimbursement or anything like that for cannabis. So,
Medicaid, Medicare don't, it will be right on, hanging. We're putting them up in, you know, housing and food, feeding, if there's any eating, yeah, we'll have to take the medication.
I think what you're not seeing in here too, that the House is debating, just if you want a little preview, I know we talked about it a little bit. They're actively discussing putting a moratorium on issuing new cultivation licenses. I think you may see something to that effect, as this bill, moves here after crossover.
Is that in the board, because you set the licenses and stuff, and if, are they consulting you, about, a moratorium? Because I thought you were in categories saying, this is, we still have room here, we don't have.
Right.
Where does that fit with?
We, board is opposed to a moratorium. That being said, at least two legislatures that have an uncapped licensing structure have placed moratoriums. The legislature did. That's Oregon has had a moratorium on new cultivation licenses for a number of years now, probably 4 years. Oklahoma recently put a moratorium on new cultivation licenses. And this is, to your question more directly, yes, this is one of the fundamental tasks that we're evaluating continuously is what is the supply and how is it matching up with demand, and what happens, how much damage does it do to existing cultivators when a new kind of indoor cultivation facility opens? They can harvest 4 times a year. We have targets. I could go into them more in depth if you'd like, but we have production targets that we haven't quite hit yet. And I know that cultivators will tell you this is the pain point right now for cultivators. This is the time after harvest where the market is flooded, particularly with outdoor cannabis, and their prices are at the lowest point that they are throughout the year. But what we don't know is how prices are going to look in July and August, because this market really is still ramping up, and more retailers are opening. There's still parts of the state that are underserved by retail. If you do anything like lift the potency caps, for instance, or have farmers markets or special events, you're capturing more of the market, and you need more cultivation in order to supply that demand. And so to put a moratorium on, we think is premature. What we've been doing at the board is slowly ratcheting down production. And we created these tiers of licenses based on how much you can grow. We never opened the largest one. We shut down the second largest one pretty quickly after it opens. We shut down the third largest one someone recently, about 6 months ago.
How do you shut them down?
We just don't accept new applications. So we're not shutting down the existing ones.
Oh, but
Yeah,
you
sorry.
aren't letting any more.
We're not letting any more in. It's looking probably likely that we'll shut down one more license site and then also move to a system where you can only apply for a new license one time a year, 1 month. And in that way, anyone who's thinking about applying for a new license can get a very kind of sobering picture of what last year's price fluctuation looked like throughout the year. And can make a kind of clear-eyed decision about, is this market oversaturated? Should I get in, should I get out?
I got a question for you. Remember when the legislature controlled the deer herd?
Yeah. Yeah, we did good.
That was I'm just saying.
Yeah, let us regulate.
Boy,
The one thing the moratorium just is not kind of capturing this early in the market is that there are a significant number of producers that were unsuccessful in year 1 and unsuccessful in year 2 and are now relinquishing their license. And so the moratorium doesn't really, pure moratorium, it's just no new licenses, doesn't really account for the people that are exiting, or if there's a flood, or if there's a kind of disease that kind of hits a large number of farms and kind of wipes out a significant chunk of the supply. It ties our hands in a way that doesn't allow us to react to those types of situations. So I don't think that the moratorium, pure moratoriums, no new licenses, will make it across the finish line. But I do think that this is a very serious conversation to have. I mean, you know, a lot of people lost their shirts in Oklahoma and Oregon because they just handed out too many licenses. I mean, there's 2 grams of supply for every 1 gram of demand in Oregon. So every year we go through this problem. Every year it's highly competitive. And then Oklahoma, they're growing 64 grams of cannabis for every 1 gram of demand. You know, and not only is it impossible to survive that as a cultivator, it puts a lot of pressure on them to sell their product on the illicit market. You know, move it, try and cross state lines with it, move it to Texas, move it to other states that don't have legal systems, and sell it there. We don't want to put our Vermonters and cultivators in that position.
Personally, God, what a nightmare, all the scientists in the legislature started trying to regulate this. That's the only, personally, I'd say that.
You didn't say that very well, nobody will pick that up. But you scream, but you talk up, so we can all hear. But, where's that being proposed, or?
There's a short form bill in the House that it got a walk through. I mean, just the concept got a walk through. There's no substance to the bill. But I think it's going to appear as an amendment to the kind of the cannabis, miscellaneous cannabis bill that is moving through the House right now.
And that's in finance or ways and means?
It's still in GovOps, which is the bill that the committee that introduced it, but it still has to go to finance and or ways and means, sorry, and then it still has to go to appropriations. So it's still got a long journey, even just on the House side.
Questions?
No.
Irene?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I don't know if I asked this last time, but curious if there's any incentive to grow outside because of the energy costs inside, and I thought we were trying to save the planet.
We are, yes, and that was a very big part. It's even in our mission statement that we're in an endeavor to encourage outdoor cultivation. So the fees are lower, you know, not tremendously low. The fees are lower. The regulatory burdens are significantly low. And I don't know what other levers we have to encourage that. But that is certainly, I mean, controlled energy, fire, or controlled environment agriculture. It is one of the most energy intensive things you can do, trying to create, you know, the outdoors, indoors. It's just you know, we got a presentation from Efficiency Vermont. They said this is just, I mean, they do what they can. They're really great about helping people fit up, use appropriate lighting inside, but they'll also help you build a greenhouse, you know, with the double pane inside and things like that. So, if there's other things we can do to encourage it other than lower the fees, I mean, that's the Rogers proposal. You know, we're all ears because it is important. It does accelerate this price crash in November. But it's also good for the planet, good for, you know, having sun-grown cannabis is just a good thing. It could be our competitive advantage as well.
Thanks.
We have a constituents that have been complaining about a farm up in Essex, Vermont, Essex
Junction.
Junction,
Thank
Vermont. And it's the way I take it, it's a cannabis farm. And there, you know, it's a small one, small size, 100 by 100.
It's a half acre. Yeah, half acre.
Well, he's only got 3/4 including the house.
Right.
And so he's got 20 ducks and a bunch of cannabis plants, and he's trying to get an exemption for, as a farmer. And I don't see cannabis, does it pay that well?
You know, this is a tough one for us, of course, at the board. I mean, legislative intent, you know, it's hard to discern sometimes, but you did write legislative intent into the original cannabis bill. You said you're creating this board, and one of our jobs is to try to shift as much of the illicit market, the illicit growers, into the regulated market as possible. This guy's been growing for years. And you know, when you try, like, the illicit market we're growing in their cellars and their spare bedrooms. You know, they when you tell them it's legal and that they should get a license, they want to move outside. And you know, you gave towns very little authority to kind of regulate that. And so, and we actually don't have the capability, you know, buffer zones or setbacks or any sort of siting was not an authority you granted us. You granted us, you know, hundreds of different authorities. This was never mentioned that we have this authority to kind of set kind of, you know, setbacks from a property line or something like that. And you know, it's kind of not really, we're not in the best position to do it. I mean, you know, we don't know these towns, like.
So ag, should that be a town issue or an ag agency issue?
You know, I think what's being contemplated in the House, not that that should kind of restrict your thinking on this, is to have kind of minimum parcel sizes. And so you couldn't necessarily do it on a half acre. And to have just very bright line setbacks from property lines. And between those two, you might be able to avoid this situation from reoccurring.
Because it's zoned as, when we looked at it on a map, it's very residential.
Oh, it's
I mean,
dense.
suburban.
Yeah.
Well, he owns 3/4 of an acre,
Right.
but the house is on here, the driveway.
Right, and then you have the next house, and the next house, it's,
Yeah, that's right. But the odor from the cannabis is upsetting, and from the ducks is upsetting to the neighbors, and you'd think that would be a town issue.
Yeah. I think that you gave towns the authority to regulate larger operations, and you kind of exempted the tier one cultivators from those regulations. I think it was an effort to kind of say, well, you're growing for the illicit market, we want you in the regulated market. You're growing in your house before, now you can grow outside. You know, and then last year there were that kind of tier one exemptions were extended to all outdoor cultivators. So the towns don't have zoning authority over outdoor regulation. But I agree with you that the towns are they're in the best position to be able to kind of know their town and know what parts of the town are appropriate for, you know.
Well, it's zoned residential, where the ag, they do have an ag district, but the person isn't in the ag district.
Right.
And so, well,
I think there will be something on this in the bill that's coming your way. It hasn't been kind of, what they're looking at now is kind of restricting outdoor cultivation based upon population density, or whether the plot is somehow connected to sewer and wastewater. Those are pretty tough standards to apply. And I've been trying to work with some of our partner agencies as to, are there maps that show us these areas or not? And so I think that they're gonna move in a slightly different direction, but you'll have kind of a bite at the apple.
yeah, I remember the fellow who was in the witness chair, who was growing, said that the local legislators were gonna put something in that
Yeah.
might restrict his ability. So I think it's Lori Hogan, maybe is that district, so.
Karen Dolan.
Carrie Dove. Karen. Dolan. Somebody in the house.
so they're gonna fix it.
Well, I don't know, they're gonna fix it. I'm not going that far.
In their view, they are.
Yeah.
Um, Well, any other questions?
No, thank you. Yeah, very
I'm here,
comprehensive.
yeah, I'm here for any, if these issues come up, or if you want me to kind of focus my attention on anything else, just please let me know. I think we really are at a critical juncture in this market, where we are approaching market saturation. We are seeing people exit. And, you know, because there's no bank loans and there's no lines of credit, people are risking everything. And they do need support, so.
And how, so we're under on sales. How about are we compared to, say, other states, with growers versus, sales?
I think our sales are doing very well. You know, I think that, you know, they're certainly ahead of where we projected. We are ahead of where we projected we would be right now. I think, between October 1st, 2022, when the first retail shop opened, and December 31st of last year, 118 million in taxable sales. So that's pretty good. I mean, I think that we think that this market could reach, depending on a few different policy choices that are made and how much those can capture the illicit market, people that are still shopping on the illicit market. You know, it could be anywhere between 150 and 190 million annually in taxable sales. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into, a lot of assumptions that go into those types of projections. People's, you know, behavior habits, the quality of cannabis, kind of price on the illicit market, et cetera. But we think that we did a very thorough market analysis before we even started trying to create our tiering structures, fee structure, things like that. And we estimated that it would be somewhere in that realm. And I think we're headed in that direction. I think if you do kind of these limited special events like a cannabis wedding or a cannabis music festival, like on a small scale, and you start capturing people that would otherwise just be kind of growing their own and consuming their own. They're kind of a captive audience at a wedding. They would purchase their. I think there are ways to do it safely and wisely that actually could be a net benefit to public safety. Because right now people are going consuming at a wedding and hopping in their car afterwards. We could mandate that not be the case.
I agree.
I think you've been in touch with this person, but there was a retail operator who was very concerned about the software and some of the registration and repetition that your system provides. Is there any work on streamlining any of that so that people aren't having to hire someone just to do the back end?
Yeah, this is the product registration. And this is an issue that it sets us apart from a number of different states, which is every unique product, you have to submit it to the board before it goes to the retail shelves. So we have to look at the packaging, make sure it's compliant with all the advertising laws, and it's child resistant packaging. We have to look at the warning label, make sure it's the actual one. You know, we have to look at the certificate of analysis from the labs to make sure it doesn't have any heavy metal problems or pesticide issues. And it takes time to do that. I think the trade-off is we've had very few product recalls, you know, and so, but very few states do this first, where you have to register the product first. And I think that there are efficiencies that we can incorporate into our product registration process. In order to reduce the time, we just had our licensing team do it at first, because it's kind of it's through the licensing portal. We moved our compliance team, they do it as well. So now we have kind of the full licensing and compliance team working on product registration. And I think we can work on that kind of workflow to kind of reduce inefficiencies there. But the fundamental question is, does it come before or after the product's on the shelves? I think our position is it should come before. It's a lot easier to kind of to pull a product before it's a problem as opposed to after. But I think that's the kind of main point that this retailer was trying to make. It's just like, let's have your compliance people in our shop making sure it's compliant then.
It also sounded like there was a monthly circuitous thing that had to happen on their end. Like every month they had to go in and.
Well, we have just a
something
requirement
with
for inventory
software,
tracking as well. Yeah, so you know, every plant has to be tracked from seed to sale, including when it's converted to edibles and like that, and then finally sold. So that is a burden, and there's no doubt about it. I mean, what other, agricultural product do you have to track seed to sale? But it is a statutory requirement.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I've got one of those.
We got an institution somehow.
Yeah, in appropriations, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think, I'm not,
Good
but
stuff,
I,
good stuff. We remember having a conversation that you two didn't have CD players, so we've got them in here.
Right,
yeah, we probably got them.
So thank you, James, always, pleasure.
Well, thank you for, anyone I can get to kind of talk about cannabis, I'm always happy. This is all I think about all day, so, it's nice to kind of have some thought partners.
Well, it's pretty important. Somebody thinks about it every day.
Yeah.
Keeps it under control so that's good. I've heard friends coming back work for us.
Now you're really gonna have to. Do some work yourself.
You're very well over there.
We're very fortunate to have Brenda. She is a really special person, for her to even turn any of her attention to cannabis was very important for the successful work.
Now you really are, you have to.
Well, pleasant to work with.
Incredibly,
Great.
she is the best. You guys really trained her well in the 8 years that she was here.
Well, she didn't learn that from us. No, and she'll do well back here.
We're lucky.
We sort of need her too. So.
Yeah.
Well, the rest committee will call